How should I play Mimighoul? Do I play Shifted? Do I hand rip? What about those new Fiend Smith cards? If only there was a video I could watch.
Hey y'all, Brendan here, and today we're going to talk about Mimighoul and the different strategies that you can play with this deck. There are many different strategies that you can utilize with the Mimighoul deck, but I'm going to talk about, in our opinion, the most competitive ways that you can play this deck. So first, I'm going to talk about the different techs that you can include in the deck. Second are different decks, engines that you can use, along with their pros, cons, and deck lists. The actual deck list files will be included in the description down below, so feel free to check those out. And then finally, I'm going to rank the different decks by competitive viability. So yeah, with that, let's get right into it. Alright, going over the techs here. The first that we're going to talk about is Shifter and Defisher. These are meta blowout cards that can single-handedly take down the best decks in the format. Fiend Smith, Snake Eye, yugioh, those types of decks, these cards can solo them. Your deck doesn't really care too much about the grave. It's sort of like Vanquish Soul in the regard that it does care a little bit, but not too much, because you'd like to be able to recycle your Mimighouls from grave using Dungeon, or use the Maker or Room effects in grave, but that's negligible if you've already gained all of the tempo in the duel. So these are great options if you're playing like a pure deck or like the cash build. We'll get in the future, but yeah, these are great options for sure. Number two, talking about Winda here. How you make Winda in this deck is you link off two of your flip monsters for Shadal Construct, and Shadal Construct is basically poly, so you'll fuse itself plus a dark monster like number 3113, IP, Anima, SP, monster like that, and then you can end on Winda, Dungeon, and Room. Now, that is a pretty strong board. It's not too reactive like ending on IP is, but depending on the matchup, it can be a great option. Number 3 and number 4 sort of go together. It's Summoning Curse along with the flip monsters. These are powerful options in the hand control build. Summoning Curse can have drawbacks as well, because say you open Summoning Curse going first, you rip a couple cards out of their hand, you're not able to go off and start special summoning yourself, or else you'll rip from your own hand. And also, it takes a while to get off your own board, because you need to, in the end phase of your turn, that's when you want to use the effect to remove itself from the field. It really depends on what type of deck you're playing, but it could be a great option. Along with the flip monsters, Sorcerer and Guard Dog, as well as Hero, the big one-eyed monster guy that allows you to draw 3. These can be great options, but the problem is they're very high rolly. Maker, you could hit with Maker, you can miss with Maker, or you could play something like Geonator Transverser so that you can make sure that your opponent gets the card, or you get the Guard Dog in your case. You can manipulate the board state to get it to where you want to be, but you spend a lot of resources to get there. There could be only one great card. This deck, it does not have the same types. Every single Mimighoul is a different type. You can end on end boards with whatever types you want to end on. It's not like yugioh in the regard that everything is a fiend. So great card to include main deck, side deck. Yeah, Featherstorm. This is a funny one, because if you overlay 2 of your level 1s into yugioh or Assembled Nightingale, then you could use Thrust to set your Featherstorm, or alternatively, if you hard draw it, then you hard draw it. But yeah, those are options you can use. Personally, I don't do it myself because Featherstorm can be bricky if you don't get those 2 level 1s on the field. But it is a blowout card, so if you want to play that, it could be fun. Talent and Thrust, these are auto-includes in the deck. Being able to proc these, but using your own effects is a no-brainer. Being able to set Room off of Thrust, rip another card out of the hand with Talent after using Archfiend. Yeah, not much to say here. Great cards all around in this deck. A couple fun ones here. Equation Cannon and Terrors of the Overroot. If you want to play a trap build, then these can be fun options. Equation Cannon, since we don't really care about our extra deck at all, it can be a great toolbox, but yeah, just including all the different levels to solve the equation for Equation Cannon and just banish their entire field while maintaining control with your Mimighouls and your dungeon room lock. It could be super fun. Difficult to pull off, but yeah, could be fun nonetheless. And then Terrors of the Overroot. This is sort of like a pseudo Mimighoul room in that it sets a monster to your opponent's field if they have a monster in their grave. And then you can send a card from the field to the grave, which is sort of like Room. What you're trying to do with Room most of the time is set a monster to their field, and then you can book a card. So this is something, if you're playing Trap deck, that you can set off a Trap Trick. And yeah, definitely something to consider there. Alright, our first list is going to be the Kashtira list. It's a pretty small package, 3 Unicorn and a Birth. You could also play Fenrir in there and Kashtira Theosis. If you would like to go down the more Xyz style route, because like we said before, this deck doesn't really care about its extra deck. Oh, and also you can play a Raid Soft. So this is the deck that we played at the NAWCQ, Dino and I did. We love this deck, and this is the list that we landed on before we moved on to start looking at a different variants. So going over the pros and cons. Pros, you don't use your normal summon with Kashtira cards, so you can still normal summon Dragon or Archfiend. Number 2, Fenrir. It adds a great layer of removal if you're trying to protect your lock with dungeons. So say they start with a special summon of a monster. Usually happens with activating an effect. You can then just activate Fenrir to remove, and then they still can't normal summon because they have a set monster. Third, Unicorn synergizes super well with the Mimighouls, since you can proc the effect turn 1 and turn 2. Just great option, just being able to rip a Requiem or whatever have you. It's an important engine piece, and great link fodder too, if you're trying to link up into like a Rabbit or an IP or Griffin or something like that. And finally, you can play Shifter. I talked about Shifter just a second ago, and the Kashtira cards don't care about Shifter. Mimighouls don't care about Shifter. So if you like Shifter, I think this is your build. And then finally, the cons. So if you're trying to go for like a larger package with Kashtira Theosis, it locks you out of link plays, which in my opinion is the best way to play this deck. I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion. Next, Kashtira Birth is another brick in the deck. In this deck, you like as many cards as possible live, since a lot of these are 2-card combos. The only 1-card combo really is Dungeon, so each card is important in this deck, and just hard opening Birth can make you pretty sad in a tournament. And then finally, not every build can utilize the card advantage that you gain off of the Fenrir Search if you are playing Fenrir. So there are other decks that are able to utilize like a card just being a card by discarding it. But nothing in this deck says discard a card, so you kind of lose the value of just having a card in your hand. It's good for follow-up if you are able to like stick a Fenrir turn 3, but yeah, not every situation is built for that. Alright, moving on to the next build, we have the Fiend Smith build. Again, this is a build that we have gone over in the past video, but yeah, this is the deck list that we think is ideal. Yeah, the pros, you have enough room for the cash engine, so you could play the last list plus throw in the Fiend Smith cards, move around the non-engine a bit, and you have a very powerful engine. You can set room from the deck by going Beatrice, dump, and then set with Griffin. So it gets you more into engine, and room is a very powerful card in this deck, so you want to get there. It produces more interruptions by you being able to turn 1 just combo off and make yourself a High King or an Apo or a Rabbit. It just adds more levels of interruption to keep your lock up. It makes it easier to play into boards. This deck is just full gas. If you're like activating Dragon from hand to special, normal summon Archfiend, then you can go Maker. You can go after that. You can go Engraver Effect in hands. Thrust is live to go into Talent. So you have tons of gas in this hand in order to push through boards and then just set up a strong board afterwards with the Fiend Smith cards. So going to the cons, you're not able to really play these great blowout cards like Shifter. Teekboo is also another one of those cards. This deck can play it because say you end on a board where you're not going to end on it like a ton of fiends, so that's fine. But it does hurt your follow up in that like turn 3 when you're trying to rebuild your board and break their board. It makes it more difficult to play under there can be only one. And also Shifter, you don't want to banish your engravers. You don't want to banish your extra deck Fiend Smith cards, so you can't really play that. Next, the extra decks become super tight. I think it's 6 or 7, 8 cards maybe go towards enabling the Fiend Smith combo, which is fine because we don't really need the extra deck. It's mostly just generic link plays. And finally, you lose harder to draw. Yeah, I mean, Tract plays into draw, Engraver plays into draw, Dragon plays into draw, Dungeon. So many ways to lose to draw. Unicorn, yeah, so many ways to lose to draw, and this loses even harder. All right, so going with a new build here. This is the Melodious build. So what you're trying to do with this one is you could just do Melodious full combo and then go into your Mimighoul plays. So, and also, very importantly, you can make Protoss. You could turbo out Protoss and lock your opponent out of special summoning and normal summoning with using your Mimighoul cards. So yeah, this is a fun one. I don't think it's been explored enough. If y'all are interested in learning more about this build, please let us know in the comments down below, because I don't think we have done our due diligence enough on really crafting this one. But this is a template that you can work off of. So some of the pros and cons. Pros is you can set up an Omni and or an Apo before even committing to your Mimighoul stuff. You can Protoss lock your opponent. So very, very powerful options here at your disposal. But the cons is there's no way to search Mimighoul Room like you can in the Fiend Smith build. And if they break your board, then there's little follow-up. In the Fiend Smith build, you can just go Engraver, Infect, Engrave, and then full combo all over again. But this one, you don't really have that follow-up. So it's in my opinion, a little bit more high-rolly. It has a higher ceiling, but it also has a lower floor than the Fiend Smith version. And the last deck list that I want to talk about here is the hand-rip version. This is probably the first version that you've seen floating around whenever this deck was first released. This is just hand control. You rip cards out of your opponent's hand, and then you play fun flip effect monsters that just stop your opponent from playing or rip even more cards out of their hands. So if all things go well, you could go like Archfiend effect turn 1, you can rip with talents, you can proc the Fire Sorcerer, and then set up another rip on your opponent's turn with an Archfiend yet again. And it's possible to also set that Guard Dog, so on your opponent's turn, then you activate Master Effect in order to flip up that Guard Dog and then stop them from special summoning. So really cool stuff that you can do here. The pros is it removes the threats from your opponent's hand before they get to play. It gives them fewer options, and in Yu-Gi-Oh, the fewer options that your opponent has, the more likely it is for you to win. And also, it can play Shifter, so great card, and that instantly gives it some bonus points. And now there's some cons here. The Fire Sorcerer's, it's a brick. If you open it, or if you miss off Maker, and you add it to your hand off Maker, you could do some Geonator Transversor lines. It's not ideal. I don't think it's actually included in this list. You can add it in order to give your opponent that Fire Sorcerer. Next, it's difficult to break boards in this deck. It's basically, if you're going second, activate Dragon in hand, normal summon Archfiend, and hope you flip up Dragon in order to blow up their board, and then rip more cards out of their hand. Maybe Talents and Thrust are really nice But yeah, it's kind of difficult to break boards. So going second, this deck really struggles. And then finally, if you do go first, the end boards can be really weak. So if you don't see your blowout cards, like Shifter, or if you don't miss off Maker, or Summoning Curse, you don't see that, you can really lose really fast going first. So going first, the ceiling isn't. There's a high ceiling, but there's a lot of variance here. If you're trying to have a fun time at locals, I recommend bringing this one. Now let's go ahead and rank the strategies. Number one, we've seen the most success with the Fiend Smith version. Like, this kind of goes without saying, but like the Fiend Smith cards in almost any deck, it's gonna just increase the ceiling by miles, and it's no different from this deck. It synergizes with Beatrice and Griffin, being able to set room, the follow-up, just the explosiveness, going first and second. It's a great version of this deck. Second, the Cashier version. You're able to play a more low to the ground version of the deck as opposed to Fiend Smith. You also get some of the benefits that you get from the Fiend Smith version. Just generic links. Being able to rip with Unicorn is great. You could play Shifter, and I think all of those packaged together, I think that's still a really good viable option, and it should be considered a good budget option to play this deck as opposed to the Fiend Smith deck. If you don't want to pay for the engravers, then I think you should play the Cashier version of this deck. Third, let's talk about the Melodious Protoss Turbo version. This deck, it can produce these crazy boards, the turn one, basically FTKs, by just throwing out your Dungeon Lock, your Protoss Lock, you put up your Omnis. But I'd say it comes third because of the follow-up problem that this deck has, as well as it's a little bricky, and it's kind of clunky. It can work well, and I would recommend that you do check it out. Maybe we missed out on some good options here, and we didn't see some lines or some synergy. So yeah, please let us know in the comments below if you disagree with what we said about this deck. Still a viable option. It is in this list. There are other decks that I did not include in this list, like the Ninja version, or the Crawler version, or the Subterra version, or the Trap version. This did make the list, so it's still a viable deck for sure. And then finally, there is the handwrit version. It's still budget, so it is an option. Although Summoning Curse did receive a massive bump due to a buyout. I don't know where it is at this point right now. Maybe it's settled lower. But yeah, a lot of these cards are cheap, and if you're trying to just show up to locals and high roll your way to the top, or just have like a few fun games with your buddies, then definitely like a really fun option. And as always, thanks for watching. If you like this sort of content, make sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe, comment, let us know how we can improve this content. If you like this content, if we can do anything better, what sort of content you'd like to receive in the future. Because we're a new channel, we're still trying to feel this thing out. And yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good day.